James, you've just come back from Taiwan. You'll be telling us all about that. Rita, what is happening? Albo, he's over there in China. He's there for 6 days. What is he going to do for 6 days?
This is the longest visit in living memory of any Australian Prime Minister. I mean, just move in, Albo. What are you doing? 6 days? Really? Is that going to take that much? Well, he's over there. He's launching a tourism campaign. He wants a lot more Chinese tourists to come to Australia. He's cozying up to the CCP, it seems, because there seems to be, James, very little said about the hard issues. China's aggression, its human rights abuses, even things that have directly impacted Australia, like the Wuhan lab leak that decimated our economy and sent us into lockdowns and all sorts of economic turmoil. How about some accountability for that? How about some discussions around that? That doesn't seem to be happening on this trip. Or their warships circling our country.
Well, you know, Rita, it's absolutely fascinating what's going on right now, because what we are seeing in real time is something that we have been warning about on this show for quite some time now. That is Labor and the Albanese government pulling further and further away from the United States and moving closer and closer to China. Now, the excuse that Albanese gives for this is he says, I'm acting in Australia's interests, but he has got now such a narrow conception of what Australian interests are that they're entirely commercial and economic, and they have no idea about principle, about foreign policy, about geostrategy, about what happens to Australia and our very sovereignty if China is able to turn the Pacific into a China-dominated lake instead of one dominated by the United States. The great failure of this government has been that it has thought that we could shelter under the security umbrella of the United States while still maintaining trade with China that's 3 times greater than the next one down. And therefore, we can't say anything bad about China. That's why this entire trip is commercially based. He's bringing, I think, something like 17 CEOs with him. Now, there's been some late talk, very late, trying to reset the narrative, saying, oh, yeah, well, we did raise a complaint about, you know, the live fire exercises, about this or the other thing. But the real thing to me that defines the problem with this relationship that we have in Australia with China is that Albanese is very willing to say about Donald Trump and say tariffs, that's not the act of a friend. But every time China does something that is abusive or bullying, they stay stum and, in fact, they actually defend China by saying, well, that circumnavigation, that was within the bounds of international law, so there's no real trouble there. I'm sorry, but there is a real problem there. There's a huge problem. And you just mentioned that I was just in Taiwan. I was over in Taiwan. I was a guest of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Taiwan and had a lot of meetings in Taiwan, a democracy that is being threatened by China. And you know what? They told me that they have been told that China does try and influence Australian elections through the local population. They told me that their ministers cannot come and get dialogue and come and visit China because it would offend, visit Australia, because that visit by a Taiwanese minister would offend China. Now, it seems to me that if we have Australian interests, those interests are in promoting democracy, not just trade, not just jobs, as important as those things are.